These are Putin's past enemies. He has eliminated every single one of them in one way or another. They have been exiled, jailed, or all too often, assassinated. But recently, Putin put a new strategy to use to eliminate a new threat. Russian oligarch and commander of the Wagner private military group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, removed his troops from the Ukraine conflict and put them on a direct path to Moscow. For hours, it seemed like a coup was underway to overthrow the Putin regime as Wagner troops overtook entire cities like Rostov-on-Don. But in an anticlimactic twist, Prigozhin stopped hundreds of kilometers short of the Russian capital. Even more bizarre, after openly calling Prigozhin a traitor, Putin seems to have let him go free. But why? We know what he typically does to his enemies, so what explains this unexpected behavior? To understand what happened, we need to look at Putin's playbook to deal with his enemies. The date is March 18th, 2018, a date marked in history as the largest collective expulsion of Russian intelligence officers in history. Behind the scenes, officers from Scotland Yard led investigations into hours of CCTV footage of what looked like two Russian men, Ruslan Bushirov and Alexander Petrov, who visited a small town an hour and a half away from London called Salisbury. 16 days earlier, on March 2nd, the two men arrived at Gatwick Airport on an Aeroflot flight from Moscow at 3 PM UK time. After checking into the city-stay hotel in London, Petrov and Bushirov embarked on what appeared to be a reconnaissance trip to Salisbury the next day. Meanwhile, Yulia Skripal, daughter of Rosso UK double agent Sergei Skripal, arrived at London Heathrow to visit her father. These two timelines violently converged on March 4th. At 11:58 AM, Petrov and Bushirov were spotted near Sergei Skripal's house, and they were later spotted on CCTV footage in Salisbury city centre, where Yulia and Sergei would soon visit a pub and have lunch at a local restaurant. At 2:20 PM, this mundane outing suddenly took a dark turn. The father and daughter were poisoned with a nerve agent. By 4:15, Yulia and Sergei Skripal were found unconscious on a bench, catching the attention of a nurse and her daughter, who spotted them slipping in and out of consciousness. A couple of days later, then Prime Minister Theresa May revealed to the House of Commons that the nerve agent used in question was Novichok, which is of Russian origin, concluding it highly likely that Russia was responsible for the poisoning. What's intriguing is the subsequent involvement of Russian officials and state-run media. On September 12th, Putin himself claimed that Petrov and Bushirov's visit to Salisbury was an innocent coincidence. The following day, the agents were interviewed on Russia Today, a state-funded news channel where they represented themselves as tourists visiting the city. They explained that a friend had recommended this wonderful town and even discussed the notable 123-meter spire and its clock. With the two agents now safely behind Russian borders, justice for the victims remains elusive to this day. In the years since the poisoning, Russian officials and state-run media have accused the US, Ukraine, the UK, and exiled Russian oligarchs of using a NATO toxin as a means of poisoning. Some have even gone as far as denying the attack altogether, suggesting that NATO used it as a pretext for a budget increase, and the UK as a political distraction from Brexit. This poisoning is just one example of many orchestrated by the Putin regime over the past 2 decades. Just take a look at this list for more proof. When you start to compare all these cases, a disturbing pattern emerges. Repression has become a defining feature of Putin's regime and his hold on power. To put it simply, Vladimir Putin has mastered the art of eliminating his political opponents and anyone expressing anger towards his regime. In all these cases, high-profile assassinations are a critical tool to generate a sense of unease among the Russian public. Take the case of Boris Nemtsov, a politician who rose from provincial governor to become the deputy prime minister of Russia under Yeltsin's government. While he never found his way to the top of the Kremlin, he became one of Putin's most vocal political opponents. Fast forward 15 years, and Nemtsov grew from a mere irritation to a potential threat to Putin's hold on power. On the evening of February 27, 2015, Nemtsov was walking across the Bolshiy Moskrovtsy Bridge in downtown Moscow, just steps from Red Square, when an unidentified gunman suddenly approached him from behind. The gunman fired multiple shots, fatally striking Nemtsov down. Nemtsov's cold-blooded murder happened hours just after he appealed to the public to support a march against Russia's invasion of Crimea. A day later, thousands joined Nemtsov's march in solidarity. Following Putin's alleged support to investigate the crimes, the official investigation into Nemtsov's murder led to the jailing of 5 men from Chechnya. One of the 5 men, Sara Dadev, confessed to shooting Nemtsov, with the others largely assisting him. Now, this particular assassination caused widespread confusion. Unlike other assassinations where investigations have been either downplayed or neglected, Putin decided to take a personal control of the investigation, ordering the investigation committee and the FSB to create a single team to come to a swift conclusion. The lawyer for Nemtsov's family, Vadim Prokhorov, agreed that the Chechen defendants were guilty, but pointed out that the architect of the crime had not been identified. 7 years after the crime, a BBC and Bellingcat investigation uncovered new evidence that Nemtsov was being followed across Russia in the months before his assassination by a government agent linked to a secret assassination squad. According to that investigation, leaked train and flight data revealed he was followed on at least 13 separate journeys. In one case, minutes before Nemtsov boarded a plane for Novosibirsk in July 2014, FSB officers followed suit, booking the same flights. When you look at the big picture, these actions solidify the image of an all-powerful and all-seeing state. Following 8 years of democratic reform under Yeltsin, Putin shifted the nation towards autocracy, employing what he calls active measures to silence and eliminate vocal opponents. Assassinations, specifically involving poison, serve as deliberate, attention-grabbing tactics in a media landscape that is already tightly controlled by the Kremlin, shaping realities to suit the Putin regime's narrative. Historically speaking, Russia has a long-standing tradition of assassinations carried out on political dissidents both at home and abroad, serving as a warning to those opposing the regime who seek change to the current system. Putin has merely reused these same tactics to eliminate his enemies in ways that make their death noticed by everyone, leaving the public unnerved and uneasy. The mastery behind these tactics is that it requires no mass repression. Putin eliminates his opponents in a surgical manner such that most citizens are aware of the events but have little to fear unless they cross an invisible line of opposition. This tactic maintains a sense of freedom unless you try to push the limits. But not all Russians are satisfied with keeping quiet and not asking questions. This is Alexander Navalny, perhaps the highest profile Russian dissident and political rival to Putin, also known as one of his biggest enemies. The Russian state has known about his opposition since 2008, when he alleged corruption in giant state-run corporations such as Gazprom or Rosneft. In 2011, reports of rigged Russian parliamentary elections sparked mass protests, and Navalny became a prominent figure, standing alongside other famous opposition leaders like Nemtsov, Kachanov, Dmitry, and Gennady Gudkov. Even though he continuously published journalistic investigations of corruption, he was able to run for mayor in Moscow, which the authorities considered a way to maintain the facade of democratic elections. He continued his push against corruption using YouTube as a platform to increase animosity towards Russian oligarchs with insightful videos on topics like Vladimir Putin's secret mansions and hidden wealth. As the videos became more and more popular, it seems Putin finally had enough. The decision was made to poison Navalny with a newly modified version of Novichok that, if you remember, was used for Skripal back in 2018. As the tactic of poisoning tea was already known, it seems Russian agents tried a new tactic, planting Novichok in Navalny's underpants before he flew from Siberia to Moscow. This reasoning followed reports by FSB agent Konstantin Khodyostov, who was tasked with traveling to Omsk, Siberia to clean up the evidence after Navalny's poisoning. At this point, you may be wondering why the Putin regime is so obsessed with these assassinations. Why not just jail them or do something other, like, hide them in some bunker or something? Well, take a look at this list for an answer. This is the list of all people confirmed to have been assassinated by the Soviet Union and Russian Federation governments. While the list does not include assassinations of political dissidents under mysterious circumstances, it still reveals how Russia is proficient and well rehearsed in these methods. It also shows how assassinations are a critical component of information warfare. While eliminating opponents cements his hold on power, it also is an opportunity to control how information is shared and spread across the Russian state. In a country with high levels of corruption, a lack of state investment or military modernization, the best way to fight your enemy is not through conventional methods of warfare, but by manipulating information to achieve a strategic advantage over your opponent. Valery Gerasimov, one of Putin's most trusted advisors and a key military figure of the Ukrainian invasion, has been a major advocate of this approach, creating the Gerasimov Doctrine in the mid-2010s. According to a report by the Marine Corps University Journal, Russia recognizes their key military weaknesses, and thus the need to involve their entire society in information warfare. The understanding was that in a fully fledged war, Russia cannot simply compete with the stronger Chinese and US military powers. Gerasimov's doctrine aims to create a dangerous mixture of disinformation and tactical warfare to make up for their shortcomings. A key element of the doctrine is the need to over-exaggerate or under-exaggerate Russia's actual capacities and inflate its image to the point of perceived invisibility or vulnerability. Recent events in Ukraine vividly demonstrate how this doctrine is applied. As you're likely aware, Yevgeny Prigozhin, Russian oligarch and leader of the Wagner Group, staged a mutiny against Putin on June 23rd and 24th, marching his troops uncomfortably close to Moscow. While Prigozhin and his cronies have justified the rebellion as a response to disconnect with the war and the lack of supplies, no one truly knows why it happened. Looking at Prigozhin's Telegram channels in the days before the rebellion, he released a few videos suggesting that the war in Ukraine was triggered under false pretenses invented by the Defense Ministry. Furthermore, Prigozhin defied the ministry's order to integrate Wagner's troops into the Russian army. Integration would have dismissed Prigozhin as the leader and negated the political and military influence he had spent months building. This framing of the facts makes it sound like Prigozhin was clearly in opposition to the Putin regime and the Russian military. However, the situation took an unexpected turn when Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko brokered peace after Wagner covered over 600 kilometers of the M4 motorway, coming within 300 kilometers of Moscow. What makes this even more confusing is that Russian state media has continued a campaign to discredit Prigozhin even after he was essentially excused by Putin. They call him a criminal, expose his vast amount of wealth and opulent interiors of his homes, while Prigozhin reportedly continues to travel around Russia freely. This is a little strange to me. Between June 27th and July 10th, conflicting reports emerged of Prigozhin's whereabouts from sources like the Ukrainian military, Belarusian leader Lukashenko, or Western media coverage. When Western media asserted that Wagner built campsites in Belarus, the Ukrainian military denied these reports as false. Lukashenko claimed Prigozhin flew to Belarus on the 27th and has remained silent on his current whereabouts until Kremlin sources confirmed that Prigozhin met Putin just 2 days later on June 29th. Currently, there are too many conflicting or inconsistent reports for the media to piece together. This raises a couple of questions. Is this a ploy by the Western media to portray Russia as internally weak? Are these reports a distraction for Western media avoiding more pressing matters, or could it be a means for Putin to solidify his power with an iron fist? In the speech Putin gave hours after the rebellion started, he never explicitly condemned Wagner or Prigozhin by name, and days after the rebellion he referred to the Wagner soldiers as heroes and true Russian patriots. A report from the Brookings think tank stated it would be a mistake to presume the regime is crumbling, as there is a chance Putin could use this event to exert tighter control over the defense ministry. After all, what is stopping Putin from eliminating incompetent generals or eliminating Prigozhin altogether? We'll have to see as the situation unfolds, but in the meantime, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.